Alrighty. Okay. You want to go for it, Ashley?
Yeah. Okay. Here we are. So it's all you, Amanda.
Okay. Wait, you got to pull up the slides, or I don't see the slides at least.
Loading.
Well, I will start before we get the slides. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us today on this hopefully rainy for many of you March day. This is our monthly community meeting, and we are very, very happy to have all of you here. We have a pretty packed agenda. We have an hour today, and we're going to try to go through a bunch of different things. We're really, really excited to have Katie Valenzuela here with us today, and I'll be introducing her more in a little bit, but we're very, very happy that she's joining us today to talk about meeting with our legislators and her tips and tricks and best practices for how we can most effectively do that. But before we get into that, we wanted to reorient everyone to our mission statement and give you guys all an update and a sort of zoomed out view of what it is we are trying to build and trying to accomplish. So I'm going to read through this in a second, but I actually am going to start by something that's not on the slide, but just a thought and what we have been, a lot of us have been talking about, which is, what is Climate Health Now trying to do? We are trying to start a movement. That is essentially what we are trying to do, which sounds scary and crazy, but is not. We are trying to start a movement where health professionals across California are activated and engaged on talking about the climate crisis as a health crisis, right? Where we who are here today are backed, where there's thousands of us, and that it is not just one person in a clinic or a hospital that's engaged on climate, or one person who's seen as sort of fringe for whom this is their big focus, but that this is an issue that health professionals across California recognize as a health emergency and are taking action on. And when we talk about taking action, we're talking about taking systemic collective action to move the system, not, certainly, there's a role for composting and individual action, but that's not what this is about, right? This is about moving systems and using our voices, which are got muted. Sorry. Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Sorry. To move the system to where we know that it needs to be in order to protect climate and health, which we know to be inextricably connected, and to center equity. So that's really what we are trying to do here. So our mission, again, is that we are a group of doctors, nurses, and health professionals in California who recognize climate change as the public health and equity emergency of our lifetimes. And I think when we started to write these words, it was before COVID, but now I think we can all say, living through COVID, that I think this sense that we will, there is a vaccine for COVID, we will get through this. There is not a vaccine for climate change. So when we talk about what is a threat to public health, this is it. We are organizing and mobilizing our trusted voices, right? Our voices are really unique and are powerful. People want to listen to us, and they want to know what we think, and we come with a certain amount of power to advocate for a rapid and just transition off of fossil fuels toward a healthy, equitable society sustained by renewable energy. So that is just a slightly reworked mission statement from what we previously had, but that's essentially, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do. Next slide, Ash.
Can you see my slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we're building toward structurally, and this is a work in progress, and we are actively looking for feedback and trying to figure out how to build a machine essentially that can accomplish this huge goal. What we're working and building toward is a kind of a symbiotic set of dual groups that are feeding each other information and working with each other. So as many of you guys know, we've had our 4 action teams for several months now. Oil and gas, electrification, divestment, and healthy voting. And those action teams are still going strong and working on creating content and looking very much at a state, a kind of a zoomed out view again of what's going on in our state around those areas where our voices can be helpful. And then what we're in the process of rolling out, and where many of you I think have already have had this experience, or hopefully will have it in the next week or so, is something that we were very excited about before COVID that now we realize is, we sort of stalled out on, and now we're rolling out, is creating local hub teams. And the reason for that is really multifold. One is that there is immense power that comes from being able to speak as a member of your community to your community, right? That's, it's one thing for me as an East Bay doctor to go into Kern County and say, oil and gas drilling is bad, and then drive away. And I don't know, right? I mean, that, sure, maybe one person will listen to me, but it would be so much more powerful to have doctors and nurses and health professionals in Kern County who live, who are part of that community speaking about the issues that impact their community. So what we're rolling out now, and what we're trying to really start to build up, are geographic hub teams, so that we have localized groups that are, that are in the same geographic area, who are working together in concert with the action team. So the idea is that the action teams can really have more of the state level view of things and provide educational material and content and suggest actions to the hub teams. Like, for example, there's, an issue going on, I'm just making this up, let's say in San Jose, about a reach code for electrification. Could the, that hub, the Peninsula and Coast Hub, send a representative to this meeting to talk about why electrification is a health issue? That sort of collaboration. So what, and Ashley's going to speak more to this in a second, but what we're working on now is building up these hub teams. And the other thing that I want to say about the hubs, and I think this really can't be overstated, is another reason to have the hubs is that this is also about personal connection, right? Like, we are doing this work and called to this work not because we're just looking for something to do, right? But because this work matters, and climate change is a horrifying, terrifying thing to try to grapple with. And so we want to create a community where health professionals can come together and be in community with each other. And hopefully not too far off in the future, some of this can be in person, which would be even more wonderful and meaningful. But another reason to have hubs is so that we can know who else and grow and connect with the other health professionals in our community around these issues. So that's sort of the zoomed out view of where we are. And then Ashley, you want to talk about 467? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So the project that the hubs are getting to know each other through working together on is SB 467, which is also known as the Dirty Drilling Bill. And I'm sure many on this call have more expertise than I do, but in brief, what SB 467, which was introduced by Senator Wiener and Senator Limon from Southern California. It will ban fracking and other extreme extractive methods in California. It will implement the health and safety setbacks from oil and gas extraction, which AB 345 attempted to do last year. And then it will also start to transition oil and gas workers currently who are doing that into abandoned oil well remediation through directing CalGEM to that, to lead that in kind of the just transition piece. So it's threefold. And these pictures actually are from last year, AB 345, but these soccer fields and this playground being beside oil extraction is horrifying, shouldn't happen, is not happening in wealthy, healthy, rich neighborhoods. And this is, we all know that oil and gas, when we burn it, is toxic because of things like particulate matter, but the extraction process is equally toxic and is harming the health of these communities because they are breathing this chronically. And I didn't include this here, but a study out of Harvard in last year showed that when you live in neighborhoods where you chronically are exposed to even the tiniest amount higher of particulate matter, when you get sick from COVID, which we know there's like disparities in who get sick from COVID, but when you get sick, you are literally at a 8% higher risk of dying from COVID because of this chronic air pollution exposure. So this bill is 100% about health equity. It's about racial justice. It's climate justice. Many groups we talk to, climate action, it's so big. What does it even mean? Where do I start? This is where we start. California Health Community is that's our campaign. This is totally a health bill. So, so this is what we're building our hubs around, is advocating locally in our hub territory for the kind of most critical senator who we have within our network. And so we're, leveraging our trusted voices, bringing that to the broader coalition across the state who's already, who's leading this work, but we're amplifying with the tool that we have, which is our trusted voices, to make the health argument for 467, especially in the era of COVID, and uplifting frontline communities who are, suffering worse than first from this. And it's about everybody's health because it's climate. And so the bill is going first to the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Water. And then the second one is the Committee on Environmental Quality. And so there's 16 senators on those committees, and it has to get through those to move forward. So in the next 8 weeks or so, we're lobbying, in the good sense of the word, those senators. And we're doing that through just scheduling meetings and giving them the evidence about the health implications of this bill, the equity implications. But we also are writing letters to the editor, and we're going to share the template that Cynthia wrote and invite a friendly competition between hubs to see who can get the most letters to the editor published in your area. Writing op-eds, creating videos, which the 467 Coalition and Vision is what it's called. They have like really great scripts for creating videos. They have health professional scripts. So all you got to do is put on your white coat or scrubs or something and record yourself. And that will be really, really important for framing this and the messaging that people start to connect this bill with health professional, social trust is what we're trying to do. We also have a letter for health organizations that Amanda and others have put together. So we're trying to gather, endorsements from like the AAP California, and I'm working on CMA and trying to get all of our health organizations to put their weight behind it as well. So it's a busy 2 weeks. This week we've had 3 hub launches that went really well. The North one is now called Capital Corridor North States, and they're targeting Richard Pan. Should be successful given that he's a pediatrician. And then just today, our central hub is what we renamed it. We are targeting Senator Laird, who's actually on the Natural Resources Committee. So that is really important. And then we also had the Mid SoCal last night. We're still trying to decide who to target from that. And then we have 4 more meetings next week to see, who in our territories where one of us is a constituent, who is the most important senator to target. So that's all happening. I hope you join. It's very fun and really meaningful. And Amanda spoke to this a little bit, but you'll probably find some best friends in these meetings because we share a purpose, and it's not just like a professional purpose, it's a life purpose because we realize what's at stake. So not to oversell it, but you probably will find some awesome friends. So we're going to turn it over. Amanda's going to introduce Katie.
Okay, excellent. So Katie Valenzuela was elected in March 2020 to serve on the Sacramento City Council for District 4. She is an incredibly strong advocate for environmental justice. She's been working to elevate the voices of frontline community members at the state capitol and with the Newsom administration, and has over 10 years of policy and community organizing experience. Katie was a founding member of the Sacramento Community Land Trust and the Sacramento Urban Agricultural Coalition, and she served as co-chair of the California Environmental Justice Advisory Committee prior to serving as the first consultant for the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change Policies at the California Legislature. She was born and raised in Oildale, California, and earned a bachelor's and master's degree in community development from UC Davis. So Katie, we're going to turn it over to you, and you should be able to screen share.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for having me today. I know we're a little behind, so I'll jump right into my screen share here. And I just wanted to cover some high-level tips and tricks and then hope that, oh, there it goes. I was like, gosh, it won't let me go. Okay. And then hope that we have some time for discussion, but I'm really grateful for your all's allyship on this bill. It's really important, and I'll get into a little bit about what's going on, but a little about me, as was said in my introduction. I grew up in Oildale, have over 20 years of experience. I actually need to update my bio. It's been longer because I got started when I was 13 years old, but honestly, it doesn't fully account for the lived experience of growing up next to the largest oil fields in the state of California in the heart of our extraction. I can tell you lots of horror stories about that, but I am currently a council member and it's a part-time gig. So I get to do part-time advocacy in the other half, and my job is to really help. And in this space, I am contracted with the sponsors of the bill for 467, and my job is to represent them and help manage the coalition and the work we do in Sacramento. So excited to be here with you all today. And just to lay some groundwork, this was a photo I took 2 years ago when we were in Shafter in Kern County. The gentleman to the left of this photo is Secretary Crowfoot. He was less than a year on his new job in the Newsom administration as head of California Natural Resources. The women on the right are parents of students that go to the elementary school that we so often portray in our photos. It was the first time in 8 years that they had gotten a meeting with the administration. They had been asking for 8 years because as soon as those wells showed up outside of their schools, they knew that something was wrong. And it doesn't take much, right, to know when, hey, wait, folks are starting to get sick. We feel different when we're standing outside. We're getting headaches. We're noticing trends. And they had been asking for years to get a meeting with Dogger and with Natural Resources so that they could express their concerns. And this was the first time it happened. And that moment was incredibly powerful. Actually, later on, don't tell them I told you this, later on, the secretary actually started crying at one point, listening to these parents talk about what was happening to their children. And it's what directly led to the health and safety rulemaking that started in November. This plus a tour in Los Angeles that Martha, who I think is on the call, helped lead and organize, led to that rulemaking and has led to the advocacy that you all are now a part of today. So to give you the big picture of what's been happening here, and I see the chat box flashing, so I hope that's not for me because I can't see what the chat box says. So I'll just put that out there. The health and safety rulemaking started 2 months after those tours, so November 2019. We had an executive order last year that said that we'd see a draft rule by the end of the year, and guess what? we did it. And now it's stuck in spring timeframe. So we're thinking we'll see a draft rule this year. We might not. It might name a number for setbacks distance. It might not, but honestly, it's stalled. And that's the message we're giving to folks, is that this was supposed to be done in December, or at least a draft was supposed to be out. And we don't know how long that's going to take. AB 345 was the first EJ sponsored bill on setbacks that we attempted. It was an effort led by Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment and other frontline community members across the state. This was really at the time that Vision started, which is the Frontline Coalition. That's also a co-sponsor of this bill, of groups in Kern and LA, Indigenous communities working together to try to advance legislation to protect themselves. We do have our bill again this year, but I do want to say that a huge factor in the success, I mean, AB 345 made it further than any of us thought it would. We all thought that it was going to die in the first committee, the first house. We're like, there is no way that the 300 building trades folks that they bust up here for this hearing is going to get this bill out, and it did. And I think a big part of that success is that we're pairing up these really powerful frontline voices with these experts. We're really letting the communities lead, and we're bringing in that those expert voices. I forget how you frame them, but I wish it was enough for community members just to say, hey, something's wrong, and for folks to believe them. That's the dream, right? Is that we don't need an expert to stand next to us and say, yes, they're right, something's wrong here. But it's a real powerful, it's recognizing where we're at, and that partnership has been incredibly powerful, and making sure that, and we've worked with physicians on webinars and public testimonies. We're doing the videos and different op-eds, and really there's even some emerging research that's really been done by experts in academia that's coming out showing health impacts up to 2 kilometers that wouldn't have happened. And he often says it wouldn't happen without this partnership he had with Vision. So it's been an incredible journey so far, but we are just beginning, and our opponent is formidable. Oops, no, I clicked off the screen, sorry. Okay, so to give you a recap, and I know Ashley just went over this, but just to briefly say, the bill is going to be amended. So if you looked it up today, you wouldn't see the full language in print. So I do want to caveat that we are adding in the setbacks language in the newest round of amendments. But essentially what we're doing is we're starting with new permits. So no new permits for these extraction types will begin right away. So January 1st, 2022, no new permits. And then we're phasing out the existing work by 2027. For setbacks, it'll be a little bit different because we're trying to play the politic a little bit, and we're saying, okay, CalGEM, if you adopt something more protective or as protective, this will be moot. But if you don't, then by July 1st, 2022, the setbacks at 2,500 feet is going to kick in. And we have provisions in the language to deal with existing wells and other legal issues. And then, as was mentioned, we're starting the conversation around just transition. There's a lot of work to do there. We've got a lot of ideas that's really been led by CRPE and Kern, talking to the steelworkers and others to try to figure out how to make that work, but we're really hopeful we can include that in the bill. And as was mentioned, this is sponsored and led by frontline groups, and this was a conversation with the author of this bill. We had a series of back and forth where we debated sponsorship, and we wanted to ensure that the frontline groups led. This is a frontline group bill. We are all here to help the frontline groups. So any decisions about language, any decisions about negotiations are all running through Vision, and then coming back to the broader coalition in partnership with the author. And that's a very intentional relationship that I can talk about. But we're excited that we have over 80 groups across the state that have already signed on to support this bill, and it's growing every day. We're getting more emails of folks who support. So it's already off to a really strong start, and we're really excited about this year. So to get into more of the meat of what we're talking about, there's one of your members right there featured in the press conference, our lobby meetings and the lobbying strategy and what we're trying to do right now. So right now, what we are trying to do is touch base with every Democratic Senate office, every single one of them, because we are not taking any Democratic senator for granted. We've already gotten a couple of surprising hesitations from folks like Senator Wachowski, who are like, oh, I actually think this is a terrible idea. And we're like, what? like you're normally out there on environmental issues. So we're trying to touch base with as many senators as we can and as many staff as we can, because that's going to help us inform our strategy. And then we can start honing in on those folks that we need to get to the vote count we need, and really deploying more deep strategies in their districts and targeting just them. So at this point, it's just broad swath, social media, videos, op-eds, just trying to get as much momentum out there as we can, and then touch base with the offices to see where we're at. I call it kind of a pulse check. We've got a lobby lobby day we're organizing for the 31st, but we'll ask for you to join meetings that we're organizing with the key Democratic senators in the two committees that were mentioned. We already have several meetings scheduled, and our anticipated first hearing is April 13th. Since we've been double referred, we have till the end of April, so we are expecting to be up in Senate Natural Resources on the 13th. So you can save that date in your calendar, and that will very likely be virtual unless we miraculously vaccinate a whole bunch more folks in Sacramento, which I don't think will happen in the next 2-3 weeks. So important talking points I do want to cover, and I know, Amanda and Ashley have access to a fuller doc on this, but I do want to highlight, and also just to lift up what happened in Kern this week, which I know a lot of you have been following. The Kern County Board of Supervisors basically green-lighted massive oil expansion and development in Kern County. And at the same time that the city of LA is starting to take steps to phase out oil extraction. And so sometimes what we hear from folks is, oh, do we really need to do this? Aren't local jurisdictions doing this? And we always focus back on Kern because we're like, this is the biggest reason why we need a statewide bill, not only to ensure consistency across the jurisdictions, but we want everybody to have access to the same protection. And the kids in Kern, the families in Kern, they deserve our support too, and they're not going to get there unless the state acts. So this is another very relevant and timely subject to bring up in your lobby meetings. But the big message of, we have this escalating crisis, and honestly, this is inevitable. Fossil fuel phase out is inevitable in California with the executive orders, with the climate targets. There's no other way we get there unless we start phasing out oil and gas. And so this is really a strategic bill to tackle the worst of it and to try to start making a plan, because that's what we need to be doing, is figuring out, okay, what do regions like Kern do for their economic development? But we also then circle back because we don't want to play too much into the opposition messaging on this. So we really do want to make sure that these are low-paying jobs. These are dangerous jobs. Actually, most of the jobs in oil fields are not union jobs. The union jobs only kick in when they're constructing something, when they're building something. The day-to-day operations are all non-union folks, and these are incredibly dangerous jobs. And honestly, and they're not even at scale. I think we have these new numbers since they're doing a study at the state. Oil extraction jobs are less than about 1% of employment in Kern County. It's less than 400 jobs in Los Angeles. I think the exact number is 328 or something like that. And so this is really about how do we provide a better alternative, because keeping these jobs, remember one oil bill we fought, it was for this refinery near Lamont, and they were saying, we really need these jobs. And there had been like 2 explosions that had killed workers and 19 open health and safety violations for this one refinery. And we kept saying, that you're trying to save those jobs? Like these are not good jobs, and you shouldn't be forced to choose between coming home to your family and not being health impacted and having a good job. It's like this, we really want to try to keep the framing away from some of those opposition points, but these are some direct rebuttal points that you could try to bring in as you're talking. Overwhelmingly, Californians support taking action. We did a poll with Greenpeace last year. SAHA did a first round, and then they followed up after COVID. So these are after COVID numbers, economic crisis numbers. 79% of Californians support taking action on buffer zones. The number actually went up from pre-COVID numbers survey. We use the same tools, the same methodologies. The number increased. So this isn't, so some people will say, well, no, in COVID, this isn't the right time. Californians disagree. So that's a really strong number we can point back to. And frankly, as I said before, we can't wait for administrative action. Honestly, if CalGEM does something amazing, which we all hope they will, that's great. We've got a legislative backup, no harm, no foul. But if they don't, for any reason, we have to have the legislative vehicle in play, because we can't keep waiting for action. And finally, and this is where the political side comes in, and my biggest tip to you, everybody wants to be on a winning team. Nobody wants to sign up and stick their neck out for something that's going to fail. And so one question you might get asked is, well, what's the governor's position on this? Well, the governor hasn't commented on the specific bill. He has talked about a fracking ban. He has talked about setbacks. So our message is, look, he hasn't commented, but we have no reason to expect he won't sign this if it comes to him. You always want to project that confidence. You want people to think this bill's going to move. And if it moves, it will get signed. So that's going to force them to figure it out. What is it going to take to get you to support this? If they think it's going to fail, then they just won't engage because they know they don't have to. So that's another big tip. Lobby meeting tips. hopefully this is redundant for those of you, but I think especially in the Zoom world, really do a prep meeting. Like I schedule every lobby meeting. It's a 30-minute meeting, and I always do the 30 minutes before as the prep meeting where we decide who's going to speak, who's not going to speak. We make sure everybody knows how to mute, unmute. Most of you will be fine with this, but you never know when you're bringing in someone new and they're like, in chaos, and you don't want that to happen when you've got your 30 minutes with Senator Laird or whoever, you want that to happen before the meeting. But you also really want to plan out who's going to speak, because you must leave time for questions. When they teach you fundraising, when you do like candidate school, they always tell you make the ask and then take a drink of water so that you pause, because you really want to leave space. You want them to talk to you. You want to know, where's that staffer thinking? What hesitations do you think their boss is going to have? Like where are they leaning? What questions are they asking, so that you know how to follow up? And you can't do that if you take the whole 30 minutes and talk to them the whole time. That's my biggest annoyance as an elected and as a staffer, was always that someone would come in, they talk to me for 30 minutes and they leave. And I'd just be sitting there thinking, well, I actually had questions or ideas, but I guess I don't get to tell you them because you didn't actually give me time to do it. So really plan it out. And it might mean that not everybody on the call gets to talk. And that's something that, you can be really intentional about rotating who talks on meetings, because sometimes there's just not space for everybody to say anything other than the introduction. And that just happens. Prepare documents to share. So the fact sheet is powerful. The fact sheet that Senator Wiener's office prepared holds a lot of detail about these types of extraction and what we're talking about. It also has the full list of supporters, which is really powerful, but also think about other things you could share. I put the name in here of an op-ed video that Josiah put together from Sunrise LA. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's 4 minutes long. It's incredibly powerful. And this is the sort of thing that I think helps California lawmakers see this from our perspective, which is this is a national media outlet. And the tagline was, why don't California lawmakers care? And like, why do they not care that brown and Black people are dying at earlier rates for this? So this is a really powerful opportunity and resource, but there are others. You could share the articles about the current oil and gas ordinance, or just something to give them for follow-up, and even during the meeting in the chat, so they have something to look at. Make sure you tell them who's attending that's a constituent. That definitely changes the dynamics. Not to say that they prioritize certain meetings more than others, but like, let's be real. If I know that there's a constituent from my boss's district in that meeting, like that's a very different meeting to me than one that's just a bunch of folks who care. So make sure you tell them if you have constituents that you're expecting, so that they know. And sometimes you can get the member to pop in if they know there's a good number of constituents involved. Take a screenshot, which I know you all do. It's just a nice way to provide evidence of the meeting in case they pretend to forget. And follow up. Make sure you're following up with them after the meeting with whatever next steps they have, even if it's just your contact information. Make sure they know that you know what the next steps to this are, and that you're going to stay in contact with them so that they know they have to follow through on that question to their boss. And finally, my last big content slide, I wanted to go over just some do's and don'ts, because I think it's always good to be in productive partnerships, to be very explicit. So always do credit the frontline groups. These are groups, what they talk about often with workers, and the thing that bothers me is that they really pretend that this bill isn't coming from people who are living right next door to those workers, which it is. This is coming from communities who have been directly impacted by this. This is coming from people who live in the regions that these members claim they're super concerned about when they're saying that they can't do this. So we really want to make sure to keep that in focus, that this is coming from the communities. The community CRPE has been working with have been asking for a fracking ban for years. So this all connects into us for how we're trying to protect communities. We also want to always make sure to highlight the supporters in their district and other big supporters. The California Nurses Association is a big supporter, and we're really excited they're on board. We want to make sure to pull those out in case they miss it in that list of 80, because we want to make sure they know this is a big deal for a lot of really big groups. We want to ask them when they will follow up. If the senator's not in the room, we want to know what their plan is, because we want to make sure that we'll follow up with them. And we want to know, hey, when do you think you'll talk to them? We know the hearing isn't for a couple weeks, but when can we follow up? Maybe we could do a meeting with the senator if they have questions, anything like that, just to force them to commit to some sort of next step so that they don't just file it away and wait till you bug them again. And then do be clear that you want to be in contact with them, that you're a resource to them, and make sure they have your information, because if questions arise, we don't want them to flounder. And then finally, the don'ts. I cannot stress this enough. Don't guess. If you're not sure, if they ask you a question, hey, what about the Teachers Association? What about this? And the answer doesn't immediately come to you as something you know for sure is true, please do not guess because that is really, really hurtful and eventually comes back to us as us misrepresenting ourselves. So always just say, hey, if there's any pause, if you're not sure, be like, you know what, I'll follow up with you. Do not guess. And then finally, and most importantly, do not negotiate for the coalition. Do not negotiate. If they bring up amendments or things they want, say, thank you for telling us, I'll bring that back to the coalition. Make no commitment, because something that happens, and it happened as recently as last year when 345 died, the senator decided that when Mr. Marisucci said, okay, I'll think about it, that was him just agreeing to amend the bill. And when he came back to us and we said no, we ended up in a pickle because he had said, okay, I'll think about it, something that the frontline groups were not willing to do. So never negotiate, always make it very clear that you're a part of a group and that the group needs to decide. And most folks will understand that, but it's good to know where they're at. Anyways, I breezed through that because I know we were super late. I did want to make sure you had my email. I know Amanda and Ashley have it. And then Kobe is the coordinator for Vision, which is the coalition of frontline groups. That's the other sponsor of the bill. So if you ever wanted to reach out to us, he's leading on all the comms if you want to do videos or if you need help with all that jazz. So I'll stop there and see if you all have any questions.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so, so much. That was invaluable. We're getting... Oh, Ashley, are you talking?
Lisa Hartmeyer had a question.
Oh, okay. I
think
perfect. We were going to skip breakout rooms and just open it up to questions and answers. So, yeah, Lisa, you want to unmute?
Or if she
Hey
doesn't.
there, sorry. Oh, my dog's barking. I was just wondering if there was any, sorry about that, any way to share this on social media to also bring attention to our personal communities as well?
Sorry, you mean about the bill or about, yeah, did you just mean about 467?
Yeah, about 467.
Yeah, we are going to come out with some social media stuff hopefully soon. We've been working with folks to create, we wanted to create like one of those click to tweet pages and kind of a home base for some of that. So we should have that in the next week or so. So Amanda and Ashley will definitely get that.
Cynthia, do you want to ask the more specific question about what had come up in one legislative meeting for you, a very specific question?
Oh, sure. Unless somebody else has a question before that, I'm happy to. So you were speaking, Katie, about the surprising hesitation that you were getting from some Democratic senators. And one thing I've heard is the assumption that goes to a lot of what happens in California, that California has the strictest environmental regulations and we are at the forefront of environmental action. So aren't we already doing enough? And, and can you speak to that or provide resources? This is actually a question I'm going to send to a lot of people in the coalition is, you know, how safe is oil and gas extraction in California? And are we really at the forefront compared to other states? Like, isn't it better that we do it here because rah, rah, we're so good?
Yeah, I'm laughing over here because what's come to light recently, and I can dig it up if it's helpful, but the Department of Finance did kind of an audit of CalGEM. So CalGEM's job is to enforce the rules and essentially found out that they're not enforcing the rules, that they just don't have the funding and resources to go out and double check. And they've made budget change requests 2 years in a row now that have not been honored to try to ramp up staffing to the tune of like 60 more folks so that they can spend time in LA and Kern and actually enforce the standards. But I think the standards mean nothing if they're not enforced is the first big takeaway. And right now we have have a lot of evidence in California that they are not being enforced. The second thing, though, is that actually California is one of the few major oil producing states that doesn't already have some kind of setback. A lot of states already have this, including Texas has different forms of a setback. And so you can say, gosh, are we really a leader if we're one of the few oil producing states that's still letting this spring up right next to homes and communities, literally right next door, as Martha from PSRLA can attest. I mean, their leadership in Stand LA has been fighting this for years, many years, because it's been springing up literally right outside of someone's bedroom window. And then when their spouse dies or their kids start to get bloody noses, everybody says, oh, it's fine. I think the other thing, which you all know well, is that there is no safe distance for oil to be near homes and schools. There just is no. There's so much that's happening. You've got the toxics that are being used on the site. You also have all the engine use that naturally occurs around with diesel generators and trucks. And like, there's just so much happening on these sites. There is no safe distance for them to be next to homes and schools. But finally, I think this speaks to like the bigger picture. We will not meet our climate targets if we continue to extract and use oil at the pace that we are worldwide, right? I mean, this is not just a California issue. This is an everywhere issue. And right now, California refineries are actually pulling in over 60% of the oil extracted from the Amazon rainforest. I mean, we are a major culprit because of our demand and because of the refining capacity that we still allow in California. And so our commitment to electric vehicles, and this is something where we try to connect the dots, our climate statutes that are in law, the targets for 2030 and beyond, and our executive order that says we're going to be all EV, this is going to happen. And so it's really about phasing out the most dangerous forms. It's not necessarily a one-to-one, oh, you ramp down here, you're going to ramp up somewhere else. There's lots of evidence that that's not what's happening. But really, that people like to argue that a lot. So we try to focus back on, we know the track that we're on when it comes to demand. And so what makes sense is that we would start ramping down production, starting with the most dangerous forms. But there are some folks who, honestly, the folks who use that excuse are not going to vote for the bill for other reasons. And so it's really about making it, those are the folks that are good to know, because those are the folks that we're going to start blasting on Twitter and in other places, being like, hey, Senator Wajkowski, why aren't you supporting a fracking ban? So yeah, they'll
right.
use any excuse. So you can close off all the academic loopholes to them, but then there's always that point where we know we just have to put pressure on them because they're just hiding behind that for something else. Sorry, I talked too long. I'll stop.
Oh no, Bill, you've had your hand up. Go ahead.
And just, Katie, we're adjusting the agenda, so we want people to be able to learn from you. So no time pressure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. So I've got a strategy question for you, Katie. My impression when meeting with individuals, giving presentations, you got the opportunity basically to present one thing. People have limited attention spans and limited ability to absorb large amounts of information. So when we're meeting with our senators, is it a better strategy for us just really as physicians to focus on the health aspects of this bill and why we should do it for health aspects? Or should we really discuss the whole comprehensive reasons not to do it, like our commitment to electrification and getting cars off the road in California and the poor jobs and the dangerous jobs, which is not really our area of expertise. So should we really try to give a comprehensive argument against this bill, or should we really laser focus on these are the health reasons why this bill should pass, and we're physicians and that's what we're here to talk to you about?
Yeah, I say focus on what you know. I mean, that's the angle you all are bringing into this. And so I think the health impacts are really important, because just because we have the quote unquote most stringent standards doesn't mean that it's protective enough. And you all bring that perspective in, which is really, really important. Obviously, they'll bring up those other points. So it's good to have that armed in the back of your mind in case you get a chance to respond. But yeah, focus on the health aspects and the research and the evidence that you all know exists. Because that is like our argument is the strongest. That's the strongest argument from our perspective, is that this is killing people, and we need you to take action. And it's not just killing the people who live near the wells, it's killing the workers and it's killing their families too. So yeah, it's focus on that for sure, but lean into your strengths. Because that's what's going to make the most compelling argument.
And a follow-up strategy question: should we come armed with data, with references, and be really technical and say, look, we've got this, quote this study and that study, and give those studies? Do they want that level from us? Or
Some of them do.
Global, simple layman type stuff?
Some of them do. So you'll know pretty quickly which staffer that is. So some staffers really want the studies, and that's a good follow-up thing, right? So keep it high level. And if they're like, well, what does it say? Well, how did they control? Then you know, okay, I'm going to follow up with you. And that's a good follow-up point. But most staffers are going to be pretty high level. Environmental quality is one of 10 things that they staff. And so you're just trying to make the case as a doctor and someone they might trust more than someone like me and Martha, who don't have like necessarily the credibility in their eyes that you all do. So yeah.
Laria. Marta, do you want to?
I want to, yeah, when we met with the governor's staff, this issue of proof was like a huge conversation on the bus with us, right? And, you know, part of my work has been promoting the precautionary principle. So I think that we actually should work on some really strong public health messages. This should not be happening. The only way we can serve our patients is to move upstream, right? So really that message and the proof thing, right? They're really worried about the proof. Do we have enough science to act? And I think that's where your voices as health professionals are really critical, right? And if we were to have an ideal visit, it would be, you know, CNA, PSRLA, and a frontline community person, and the CNA person would deliver that just transition message. And we've been working with them on some of our other work, and they're really good about, we are not, you know, we want to stand with our brothers and sisters, but we don't think the labor movement should be divided. They're really good. So getting them on board and on our visits for the folks who labor matters to will be really important.
CNA, Marta, California Nurses Association?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
And Laria, go ahead.
Hi. Well, actually, that's a really, really good point, Martha. And it kind of leads into something I was going to say. I do have a question for Katie, but just really quickly, Jeff Mann and I had a conversation earlier this week about pulling together a small group to come up with some presentations that we can share amongst our group, as well as with other health professionals, that they can then bring to their organizations, to bring to nonprofits, to bring it to labor groups and so forth, that really tell our story and define our message very clearly. And I think that having a presentation / evidence-based presentation with this type of data for us all to use would be great. Why have us each reinvent the wheel? Let's just do it together, and then we can each use that. So that's something that I was going to bring up. My questions are twofold. One is, I always like to know what the other side is saying before I pitch my side, so that I'm really clear on that and about what the response might be from the other side. So that's one question. And then the other question is, when you talked about dangerous and low wage jobs, sadly, my mind went to undocumented workers. And I am wondering if you have data or statistics on how many undocumented workers are in these types of positions, and how some of this advocacy that we're doing will or will not affect them, and will or will not affect the decisions of the legislators for or against what we're talking about.
That's a great question. To address your latter one first, I think, I mean, we just got these extraction numbers on how many workers we're talking about last month. So, I mean, we've been waiting to get the breakdown of like, how many people are we actually talking about? And then between that, like when I say they're non-union, that is purely based on our field knowledge. We have no numbers. The industry does not share those numbers with us, how many workers are steel workers versus not. So that's just based on what we understand in terms of process, and honestly, even what CalGEM staff knows, which is unless it's construction, it's not union. So we kind of guess that we think that probably 2/3 of those numbers aren't union, but like, it's really just speculation. I see Martha coming off though. You probably have better ideas for LA.
Well, I'm trying to track down in my files, which are not well organized. We have a jobs report for the city of Los Angeles in terms of how many jobs. None of them are union. It's worse. They're all contract workers, and contract workers means, and subcontractors means there's no worker protections for them. So, and our jobs report actually showed that there's more jobs in the cleanup and restoration, more jobs and more opportunities for economic development. So I will find that and send it out.
Please do, Martha. That's super helpful. Yeah. And so I guess what I'm saying is, long answer, we don't know how many of those folks are undocumented, but I would expect, I mean, especially when they have spills, you know, we've heard some really horrific stories from former oil workers about how they manage spills, trying to kind of keep it under the radar, essentially sending in folks to clean stuff up that like they are not trained or qualified to do. And so it would not surprise me at all to find that they use, I mean, a lot of these subcontractors, when they find workers, a lot of those folks tend to be undocumented. That's what we're seeing in the forestry space anyways for wildfire. And they send people in with chemicals and no gloves and no masks and just who don't speak English and tell them, hey, go clean this up. So I would not be surprised, but there's a lot we don't know, I guess, about those workers. And that's why the on the ground work that like CRP and PSR and others are doing to try to build those bridges is super critical. But to your earlier point, we actually just got our first opposed letter. It's like, yay, they finally sent it. And I think I can put it in the chat. And it's surprisingly weak, so we'll get more later. But I mean, the big thing is these are good jobs, they pay good money, and you have no plan, which, I mean, frankly, they're not totally wrong. We don't really have a plan. They are wrong about the quality of the jobs piece, but we don't have a plan for Kern County. And this is like the biggest economic development failures, that we let a whole region of our state become completely dependent on one industry. And so like, that is a real question. But the whole thing about this is just going to increase our imports and dependency on other oil. That's where the whole EV mandate comes in, is like, well, if we're decreasing demand though, then is it really that simple? It's not anymore. And plus there's some studies out there that show that it's not one-to-one like that, which nobody seems to want to talk about. So that's kind of the big arguments, is the jobs, and is the fact that, and so what you see in Sacramento, so those of us who are lucky enough to live in Sacramento, what we see are all of the commercials they air for the legislators. This is the one city where all the legislators live for 2/3 of the week, right? So I've already started seeing commercials airing again. Energy independence is a big thing. Well, it's better for us to produce here. And then they cite the human rights violations in other countries and say, this is just going to send those jobs to places that, you know, hurt women or hurt LGBTQ people. And it's really atrocious. So those are kind of the big messages. But honestly, as I said before, the people who use those arguments, the legislators who use those arguments to defend, are not going to support the bill. They're just it's a convenient way to give them an excuse to not support the bill. So you don't waste too much energy trying to argue it. I mean, we have counterpoints, but there's a point where, you know, like my dad used to say, don't waste time trying to make sense out of nonsense. Like it's not coming from a common sense place. Like they're just saying that because it's a convenient way for them to message why they don't support something that frankly they wouldn't have supported anyways. So try to make your case, but in the end, take the notes and walk away. But that's a taste. This is the first of what will be many a letter, I'm sure. So perfect timing. We just got it today.
Alrighty, guys. Sadly, I think we're going to start to wind things down as we're coming up on 5 of, I just saw, Karen, you put in the chat, did the bill in Kern County on fracking and fossil fuels pass? I think you're referring to, did they greenlight the ordinance? And the answer is yes. And it was unanimous, 5-0. They greenlighted all of them. That was, I think, on Monday night.
We need to fast track that 67,000 new wells can be drilled.
Yeah. And I mean, others on this call know these statistics better than I do, but I think there were something like 8 hours of public comment testimony from the community that was recorded that all 5 of those council members listened to. And it was very, from what I understand, it was very emotional, and yet it was still a unanimous. There was
the comments were played. I don't think they were listened to.
Well, they were played, right. But they, right. That is a good point.
Amanda, that the nurse practitioner group did a lot of advocacy on that. And
wow,
I'm not surprised about the result. I just hadn't heard.
Yeah. I think.
Can we give Katie a round of applause? If everybody wants to unmute and say thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And there's many comments. We'll follow up with you on this. There's a lot of like, can we get these slides? So we will follow up with you.
A huge thank you. Yeah,
happy to help. Thanks for your allyship on this. We're really excited. We can feel the momentum, and glad you all are a part of that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Just a few other general updates that I wanted to share just before we wind everything down. So we will, if we can share out Katie's slides, we definitely will. We're going to send out our newsletter maybe Friday is what we're targeting. And that will have a summary of all of this and will link to many of the things that were mentioned. I do want to just put in another plug in the chat for what Laria and Jeff mentioned, which is this idea of starting to really pool resources around how we talk as health professionals to other health professionals, getting back to this whole movement building piece. I personally am really interested. I have grand rounds coming up at Madera Children's. Their catchment area includes Kern County and Bakersfield. They've never had a talk on climate change and health for the PEDS department is what I was told. So I know what I want to say, but I don't know if it's going to resonate, how it's going to hit. So I would love to have a group to kind of bounce those ideas off of. So if you're interested in that, talk to Laria, Jeff, or you can always contact me and I'll connect you. So we wanted to put in a quick plug. This, I think Katie mentioned this has already come up, but Vision is asking for videos to support SB 467, specifically from health professionals. We're talking, and hopefully we're talking with other health organizations in California about maybe making one video that would have lots of health professionals, but there is such power in just a video that's just you. So I included we'll send this out as well, but that's the toolkit for doing that. And then one last plug, actually, Ashley, can you screen share one more time if you're able to? One last plug is we are circulating a health organization sign-on letter in support of SB 467. And we have multiple signers already. Actually, you know what? I can screen share. Let me just show you guys this. This is imperfect, but can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the signers who we have already. Really excitingly, we have the American Academy of Pediatrics California that signed on. And there's as you can see, lots of other groups as well. But if you are connected, all of us are connected to other medical organizations, medical societies. We're working to try to get CMA and some other medical societies to join. But if your organization or another group you know of could sign, please let us know. And then I just learned this actually in real time. Sorry, you guys don't need to see the rest of my screen. In real time a few minutes ago, but I think there's also, Vision is also asking if we could have a letter that has individual health professional signatures as well, just to show sheer numbers. This is how many doctors, nurses, health professionals in California see this as a health issue. So stay tuned for that too. Alrighty, we are at 1 o'clock. Our next monthly meeting, let me make sure I have the date right, is April 14th. That will be at 8:30 a.m. So stay tuned for that. And stay tuned for the wrap up and the newsletter. And thank you all. And thank you again, Katie, so much for joining us. We are so honored to have you.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, onwards.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.